been about a week since my last update. Going through this device, or going through this radio, trying to troubleshoot what's happening. I think I've identified the problem, and it's this single inline package IC right here. Checking my voltages on it, I'm only getting voltage on the input, which is 12 volts. All the other pins are dead. I went ahead and ordered that IC, and they came in. Only need one, but I got two in the lot. So today I'm going to pull it. Here's the back side. Unsolder this, unscrew it from here, and then reapply some duck butter on the back side here, and take our test. Some of the things that I did to confirm that, or hopefully confirm that that is the culprit, was I replaced all the capacitors in this area, and I checked the transistor. Transistor checked out fine. Capacitors, they were outside of range, both in its rating on the jacket and ESR. None of them were leaky, none of them were bulgy, just at the end of their lifespan. While I was waiting for the new replacement SLIP or SILP IC to come in, I replaced these two capacitors here. I replaced a resistor down here. I've checked this transistor here, replaced the capacitor here, checked this transistor, checked this transistor. I had to replace this capacitor. There was none in the socket. However, on the back side of the board, they did have one soldered. It was the wrong value from what the board, from what the schematics read, so I did replace that. And there was another capacitor right here, ceramic capacitor, that it too had the wrong value from what the schematics read, so I put that in place with the correct value. After I replaced the IC here, my next step is to go through the rest of the transistors, check them out, and then replace the handful of capacitors that need to be replaced. Right up here in this corner, you can probably see a whole gangle of capacitors, as well as transistors that are tucked right up in that corner. That's going to be where the fun's at to replace that, but I'm sure we can get those no problem. So with that said, let's go ahead and start the process on removing that IC. The way how I'm going to unsolder these pins, make it quick and fast and easy, is I'm going to wipe some solder flux on the pins as well as my braid, and that should pull that up pretty quick, pretty easy. Well, there's the old part that I just pulled out. Kind of interesting is that part number here reads HA1339A alpha. Schematic reads just simply HA339. Now, cross-reference wise, they do. But what's kind of interesting is that's the old part. There's the new part. As you can see, just slightly bigger. This one here actually has 12 pins. 2 are snipped. And this one here is just simply a 10-pin package. The holes do line up, so we should be okay that way. Should have enough room in there. Yes, we have enough shoulder room in there. We should be just fine. Heat sink, of course, will be just a little tiny, but it's going to have to work. And as you can see right here in the schematic, it's labeled HA1339. Next thing I need to do now is clean the pads up and put the new IC package in. I checked both of these on an ohm meter and a diode meter. The old one is definitely not showing or responding the same way that the new one is outside of the radio. So I'm pretty confident that yes, this is definitely the issue. We're going to find out next because this is going in the board or going in the radio. It's going somewhere. I have the new IC installed and I do get audio. It is a success. However, it's extremely low. So I will carry on and take it from there, make sure that all my solder joints are proper. I know that on the board there is some cold joints that I need to hit those up, but at least it's progress. That's our next step. Finish out the capacitors and troubleshoot the loudness of the audio. Here it is, about day 367,897 million quintillion, working on this radio. Realistically, I'm probably another couple weeks out since the last go around due to ordering parts or equipment or dealing with personal issues. Haven't been able to work on the radio as much as I'd liked, as much as I'd hoped. The owner of the radio, of course, has been made aware of my situation and the standing as I keep him update every week. He's fully aware of what's happening. But now it's time for me to tell you what's happening, or what has happened. I honestly don't remember what happened since the last time. I think I was waiting on a part, this IC, and that's the old IC. So I've got the new one installed. That did not fix the issue. Although I started getting my proper voltages coming out of the package as I should, where the old one, it was dead as a horse. I was only getting pin number 1, which was the input, 12 volt, and that was it. So I got that in. I have finished completely recapping the entire radio. I have pulled out every single transistor and checked the transistors for functionality, and they all checked good, so I put them back in. The caps, like I said, I put in new caps all the way around. I tested a few as I went, and some were good, some were okay, a few bad. So I'll check them later on and see what they were. I've replaced a couple of capacitors and resistors. I found a couple capacitors like this one right here. This one was not in the board, but there was one mounted on the back side, on the circuit side. However, the value was completely different of what the schematic read. So I put in the proper value. I replaced a resistor down here. Oops, let me get my finger out of the way. Resistor here, replaced that cap. Had same situation back here as well. Had a cap. Not only was it the wrong value, but it was the wrong type. The board, the schematic called for a electrolytic. There was a ceramic, so I put the proper value, the proper type in. All these capacitors back here, there's a whole gangle of them, and they were big fat 1977 version, where today's modern is just a fraction of that. And so that don't look like they're fighting for room, plenty of breathing room, plenty of space. I checked this coupling capacitor because in line it showed wrong value. I pulled it, and once out of line it was just fine. On the back side of the board here. Oh, I also wanted to notate, you're watching this in black and white. Why? Because for some dumb reason today, when I turned the camera on, that's what it wanted to do. So fiddled with all the connections and made sure everything was seated on the camera and all that good stuff. And that's how it wants to do, so I'm not going to fight it. You could imagine, use your imagination if you want color. But otherwise, this is old school black and white. On the back here, this capacitor was another capacitor that was wrong value. Even though it was in place, it was the wrong value. I swapped that out. That capacitor I was telling you that they had on the back of the board was in this area right here where this white wire is. Put in the right value, put in the right cap. Right here, right now, presently, there is no capacitor. Originally, there was a 0.01 ceramic capacitor. The book called for a 10 microohm, try it again, 10 microfarad capacitor, electrolytic, and so I put that in. Although I had another problem. Once I put everything in, turned it back on, I had sound through the speaker. It was not loud at all. I had to turn the volume full blast in order to hear anything, and it was just barely audible at that. So probing around, signal generator, I find that the volume control switch worked. It responded like it should. So I followed it down to the board down here. And because this board is just so jam-packed and you really can't get your probes in there properly, adequately, because of how condensed it is, as well as these thick walls of the radio, I was subject to just go ahead and pull all components out. It was much easier. I checked all components with a component tester that I had bought from eBay. You may have seen that. And that checked them to be good. Now, I did not rely exclusively on this. For other components, I relied on my voltometer. And for any transistors that needed to be checked, I did check them with that component tester. I also checked them with the voltometer, both in the ohms position and in diode position. And one of the other pieces of equipment I picked up, which I have put up right now, is a vintage Micronta transistor checker. So with all that redundancy, everything looked good. Stuck everything back in place as it should. Tested the radio out, and lo and behold, it worked. I would conclude that I must have had a cold solder joint in this section. I was happy. However, with that, my squelch, I lost control over my squelch. I can turn the radio on, turn the squelch left or right, no longer makes a difference. I get no noise. So I'll need to come back down here into the squelch section of the board, double check my work, and also reflow solder, make sure everything's adequate. So as stated, the radio does now work. So let me connect power to the board. I've got positive already connected. So just hooked up my negative probe on this end. Hit the power supply. And there you go. So that's pretty awesome that it works. Now, one other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is the crystals in this radio. I believe are going to be vintage. The radio dates from 1977, and I do believe that's probably about how old these crystals are. If not, then they're definitely in the neighborhood. One of the pieces of equipment I bought was a new frequency counter. I have two other frequency counters. One of them I need to work on. It don't really work too well. It powers on, it displays, but that's it. It don't read a frequency or anything like that, so I need to check that out. And I have another handheld vintage Radio Shack frequency counter I bought brand new when they came out. Unfortunately, since I have been an inactive ham operator in probably, I don't know, 15 years, I packed all that stuff up. I had no need, no desire for it. A lot of my gear I sold, and there's a few pieces I kept. But that's put up, and I have really no easy accessibility to it. It was a lot easier just to buy this and wait a week for it to come in, so I did. So I got this hooked up. Let me kill my lights, my overhead lights. Turn the radio back on. Kill the volume. I do believe the crystals are off. I need to clean the sockets just to ensure I've got good connectivity with them. But there's there's a good possibility they're going to need to be replaced. So let me key up the radio.
Breaker 19, this here's a rubber duck. You got a copy on me, Big Ben, come on? Well, yeah, 10-4, Big Ben, for sure. By golly, it's clean clear to Flagtown, come on?